Welcome to episode 76 of EDH Commander Challenge. I'm your host, BT, and today's episode is dedicated to our latest Twitter follower, Red Deck Tries. A really cool Twitter page filled with deck ideas, builds, and not to mention opinions on cards new and old. So please go check them out. That's Red Deck Tries. There'll be a link to their Twitter page in the description below. And speaking of red, today's episode is Mono Red versus Mono Red, aka All Red Everything. Two decks that I know personally would give me a hard time in any situation. So I can't wait to show you that. Just two things real quick to mention. Once again, we are getting closer and closer to our 800 subscribers special. My deck would probably be ready by about the end of the week, I'd say. So I can't wait to get started on filming that. It's going to be great. And as of the filming of this video, guys, we're getting closer and closer to 1,000. We're just around 865 subscribers as of today's video. So please continue to support us on our road to 1,000. Without any further ado, let's introduce our players and their opening hands. First we have Josh playing his Zozu the Punisher deck. He keeps an opening hand with By Force, Reiterate, Stranglehold, Snow-Covered Mountain, Darksteel Ingot, Mana Web, and Soul Ring. Then we have Mark playing his Neheb the Eternal deck and keeps an opening hand with Faithless Looting, Anger, Sizzle, Runeborn Hellkite, and 3 Mountains. Get a dice roll off camera to see who would go first, and Mark was the winner, and he'll start us off. Let's go! Mark plays a mountain and casts Faithless Looting and passes. Josh plays a snow-covered mountain and casts Soul Ring and passes. Which, by the way, just to let you guys know, Mark discarded Anger as one of his cards to Faithless Looting, so now all of his creatures have haste. Mark plays another mountain and passes. For Josh's turn, he casts Darksteel Ingot and passes. For Mark's turn, he plays a third mountain and casts Extra Planar Lens, removing a mountain, doubling his mana. By the way, this sadly does not work with Josh's snow-covered mountains. Then Mark passes turn. While it seems Josh is having trouble drawing lands, he casts Shattering Spree and uses it to destroy Mark's lens. He then casts Cold Steel Heart, choosing red, and passes the turn. Mark plays another mountain. He flashes back his Faithless Looting to draw and discard 2 more cards, and passes. For Josh's turn, he casts his general, Zozu the Punisher, and passes. Mark plays another mountain, taking 2 damage from Zozu, and then casts his Baby Furnace Whelp. He then moves into combat, since it has haste, thanks to his Anger, and attacks Josh for 2. Then he passes turn. For Josh's turn, he casts Pillage, destroying one of Mark's mountains. Then Josh moves into combat and attacks Mark with Zozu for 2 damage. Then he passes turn. Mark plays another mountain, taking 2 damage from Zozu again. Then moves into combat and attacks with his Whelp. He pays 3 to boost its power by 3, dealing a total of 5 damage to Josh. Then he passes. Josh plays another snow-covered mountain, taking 2 damage from his own Zozu. Then casts Mana Web, essentially forcing players to tap out their lands every turn in order to play spells or activate pretty much any ability. Well, at least any that cost mana, right? He then moves into combat and attacks Mark with Zozu again for 2 damage. Then he passes. During his end step, Mark casts Expedite to essentially draw a free card. Josh, also wanting some free card draw, casts Reiterate to copy the spell. Of course, the haste part doesn't matter, but you get the point. Mark plays another mountain and gets another zap from Zozu. He then casts his general, Neheb the Eternal. He then moves into combat and attacks with both his creatures. As Josh declares no blocks, he takes 6 damage. Thanks to Neheb's trigger, Mark gets 6 red mana. He uses one of them to cast Monastery Swift Spear, and another to cast Relic of Progenitus. Then he passes. For Josh's turn, he casts Mana Barbs, causing players to take damage whenever their lands are tapped for mana. Then he passes. During his end phase, Mark taps his Relic to force Josh to remove a card from his graveyard. For Mark's turn, he goes straight into combat, and he attacks with his General and his Whelp. Josh blocks Neheb with Zozu, causing Neheb's Afflict ability to trigger. Along with the Whelp's damage, Josh takes 5 damage total, with Mark choosing not to pump the Whelp. Josh moves Zozu back to the command zone, and despite getting the extra mana from Neheb, Mark simply passes. For Josh's turn, he casts Mycosynth Lattice, taking 2 damage from his Mana Barbs, and passes. For Mark's turn, he again jumps right into combat and attacks Josh with all of his creatures. Josh takes 7 total, and then Mark passes the turn without playing any new cards, despite having tons of mana at his disposal. For Josh's turn, he plays a snow-covered mountain for a land, and casts his secret weapon, By Force, where X is 6. He targets all 3 of Mark's creatures, his Relic, and 2 of his lands. This is possible all in thanks to his Mycosynth Lattice, which makes all cards currently in play considered to be artifacts. But Mark reveals he was waiting for this the whole time, and casts Chaos Warp, targeting the Mycosynth Lattice, shuffling it back into the deck. After shuffling, Josh reveals his top card is Ankh of Mishra, which essentially is an artifact version of his general, Zozu. So whenever a land comes into play, a player takes 2 damage. Each player takes 3 damage from Mana Barbs. And with the Lattice gone, the Relic is the only legal target, which gets destroyed. Then, Josh passes the turn. With nothing left to stop him, Mark then moves into combat during his turn and attacks with all 3 of his creatures, winning the game. Here are my choices for Cardboard MVP for this week's episode. In the case of Josh, I'd have to say it's Zozu himself. The reason being is while Zozu didn't get to be the normally amazing, terrifying threat that he normally is, he did manage to mete out 10 points of damage between combat and landfall triggers all by himself. And the game could have gone very differently if, say, Josh had drawn something like a Starstorm for a board wipe, or maybe a Blasphemous Act, or even a Pillow Fort card like Ensnaring Bridge would have been wonderful. Or of course if his by force he tried to play towards the end had been successful. Speaking of which, when it comes to Mark, it's gotta be that Chaos Warp. Because if that Chaos Warp had not gotten rid of that Mycosynth Lattice, Mark would have fallen victim to something pretty much akin to an Obliterate, losing all of his creatures, his one and only artifact, which technically did get destroyed, and of course some of his lands. This could have very well bought Josh all the time he needed to gain control of the game and take over completely, NWO style. Do you agree with our picks? What cards do you think did the most work for each player in the game? Let us know in the comments below, along with the hashtag AllRedEDH. Alright guys, that's it for this week's episode. Hope you enjoyed watching. Just want to let you know, if you aren't already part of our ever-growing EDHCC family and you want to join in on the fun, make sure you smash the subscribe button and the notification bells down below, and you'll know every single time a new video drops. Now, we do videos every single week, so don't forget as well to like them, share them, comment on them, but most importantly, enjoy them. Shout out to all of our family members, our subscribers, our viewers, if you will. It is an honor and a privilege to do this each and every week, and you joining on the fun with us. Until next time, I'm your host, BT, reminding you to check out all of the videos on the channel. Join our game. It's now your turn. Cheers!